Hey everybody, my name is Mark Wolf. I discovered the grand unified theory of game design. The basic primer is in the description below, and this discussion is going to be a wrap-up of the intro series I just concluded, covering the theorem in depth. I thought it would be good to cover some why questions, such as, why did I do this? Why do we game? Why is this discovery important? And also this discussion will answer a few how questions. So to start, why did I do this? Or better yet, how? Well, I think first I realized there was no definition of a game, and that made something click. I saw the mental picture of the gaming landscape, that we had this thing we were doing called games. We're making and playing them, and all our designs and wants are aimed at the same thing. What is that thing? So here are the pieces I connected. I looked at my 17 years of game design experience at the time, covering a wide range of genres, and also the other things called games that existed in the world, and I started analyzing where they fell short. What were the things I had done or seen in designs that undermined that enjoyment? Things like random outcome and solvability stood out as major issues, with solvability covering a lot of things ranging from hallway video games to pay-to-win scams like TCGs, or a lot of modern online games with microtransactions. Then I asked, what is being undermined? Once I closed in on the idea that what mattered was the player, their agency, and the stakes, i.e., the skills and actions alone of the players is what determines victory, I worked backwards and figured out all the ways you could undermine that. Once I figured out the theorem, it was simple to test and verify because everything in the theorem is logically falsifiable. Survey analyses of games further confirmed what the logic showed to be sound, and the implementation in Mage War was, oddly enough, sort of simultaneous. Mage War came about as a long-pondered idea for what my ideal card game would be, and figuring out what those requirements were through this research then formed the design standards for 2nd edition. Mage War did come about, though, after years of fruitless pondering in a sudden eureka moment one night, during which the entire, albeit very primitive, first draft rule set of Mage War 1st edition was written. If you know there's a phenomenon that happens in a causal fashion, even when there's deviation, then there must be a logical mechanism by which it occurs. All I did was study what was true and what was false until I understood that mechanism. Science is just logic with extra steps. I'm half kidding. It's the logic fields, not the STEM fields. If you don't believe me, ask someone who does microchip architecture design. So, why do we game? Well, I think the simple answer is because our brains knew if we could get it right, it would be fun. And I think the idea of fun in games is tied together here, and there's a lot of ways that you can have fun, but games are an activity that crosses all boundaries to the extent that only your skill and actions matter. So, if you want to get technical, then the pursuit of happiness is a fundamental human right, and fun is a pursuit of happiness. If you want to get even more technical, the grand unified theory of game design proves that a game is a universal concept, independent of either our knowledge that it existed or even our own existence. If you want fun, there's a social activity where the skills and actions alone of the players is what determines victory, and this means the arbitrary value of that competition is preserved, giving it value as a social interaction. No matter what the stakes you play for, game value is preserved, which means the stakes can truly be anything, even nothing. And, all things being equal, anyone can be a viable player, meaning anyone can be competitive. And this is the big point. Anything claiming to be a game that is not theory compliant is provably, objectively meaningless as an activity. It means your decisions do not matter, ever. Even if you're unaware of the fact, just because you don't know what you're doing is meaningless doesn't make it not meaningless. And in fact, it exacerbates the amount of meaning that activity takes from you by wasting your time and resources without your knowledge. And lastly, games are a facet of consciousness existing. They are an emergent property of the environment consciousness exists in and conscious entities naturally interacting. I'd be curious, though, how theoretically games would be played differently by entities that perceived higher dimensions than we do, and what role that plays in consciousness. But that's just food for thought. And I think I covered some of that in the first and currently only Deep Thoughts video. So finally, why is this important? To put things I've said before a little differently, not only do we now have the ability to make something that fully preserves game value and thus qualify as a game, but now we can do so reliably. This not only restructures how several multi-billion-dollar industries operate, spend money, and structure design and likely production, but also shines a light on an education system which purports to award degrees in game design when in fact their curriculums only amount to game production, essentially funneling students out of other fields like computer science and illustration into a bastardization of those fields to profit from false advertising. They can't teach something they don't know, but they demonstrably chose to claim to teach that thing even when their curriculum completely lacks any such lessons. If you don't believe me, you can look up the current best game design degree programs in the US and look through their curriculum class lists. All they're really teaching is video game production, which again would be done much better if those students had actually gone into the fields that informed those tasks like computer science, illustration, logic, math, physics, etc. What is also profound here, though, is that this also means the first ever skill-based tournaments can now exist. It's surreal to think, but provably true, that there's never been a tournament of any stakes that has ever been determined purely by skill. Without preserved game value, the house always has an incentive to be dishonest in bets, and game manufacturers have always had an incentive to scam players. Now we can have real tournaments because we can have real games. The skills and actions alone of the players determines victory, and for people betting, this means game value is fully preserved. It is not solvable, the house has no advantage, information is transparent, and the outcome is also not random. This is, of course, all things being equal, which is to say, standard deviations and bad actors aside. So, wrapping up here. Videos in this series moving forward will cover more advanced topics on both game design and probably some industry and other topics, but we'll assume you've watched the introductory series and are familiar with the primer. But with the basic framework now public and freely available for all, to all you game designers, get out there and design real games. If you're a player, don't take any shit from not games. You deserve more fun and real games. We all do. Designers, hold yourself to the standards of formal game theory. Players, don't accept anything less than real games from publishers. Thank you for watching. Mark out.